Revolution. Topic today is going to be, should I become a foster parent? Now I know I've had discussions in some other videos about some other topics, and maybe they've been a little bit uncomfortable for some people, and that's okay. But today I'd like to talk about something that's maybe on some people's minds who either they don't have kids or the kids have grown up and so they have empty rooms in their house and they wonder, okay, what would it be like if I have foster kids? What are some things that I can expect? What's it like to work with caseworkers? What can I expect from kids? Even though that's almost, there's no guarantee on that as far as what you could expect in a child. But to start off with, my wife and I, we actually have had a total of 19 foster kids go through our house. We did it for like 7 years in another state than where we live now. And we actually ended up adopting 6 of those 19 children. And, it's been an awesome experience. There have been some things about it that I really didn't like. And I'll try to go into some of those as we go along through the conversation here. Becoming a foster parent. Well, first of all, if you have room in your house, probably is a good thing to consider. Some people, I hate to admit it, do it for the money, and I'm not going to knock that because a home where someone at least gives a little bit of love is better than a home that gives no love. Some numbers, I saw a report that California, as of July 1st, 2018, they had almost 60,000 foster kids in their system. And that's a lot. And I know this may digress a little bit, but it had been in the news about the number of kids that have been separated from their parents who, crossed the border and their parents have been detained or whatever, and their kids have been put in some sort of homes or whatever it was. That was about 1,800, the thing that the news was making a big deal about. So California alone, if we take all those people who cross the border out of the picture, they have about 60,000 in one state. So if you have 50 states, just think about how many kids are really in various states' foster kid systems. We're talking like, hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million. I didn't really look up the number, but it's a lot. So foster homes are needed. Now, the problem with becoming a foster parent is the educational process and the time and work that it takes to work with a state agency. In our experience, when it comes to caseworkers, most of them were not the best caseworkers, and that's just the way it works. Some of the things that you need to do in order to become a foster parent is, first of all, you have to take some training courses. In the state that we did it, there was 2 basic training courses you had to take in order to get certified, and then you had to take another 6, and then you have to do so many hours of education or training each year in order to get recertified. You have a certifier who is the person who kind of collects all your records, does the interviewing of your references, and the person who collects all the paperwork, and that person is a separate person from all the caseworkers for children. That person will collect your family history information. They will ask for references from family or friends, and then they'll send letters to those, and those people have to write references for you. So that really shouldn't let it stop you from becoming a foster parent unless you actually have criminal activity that is in your family. We have some people that we actually became foster parents for, and the grandparents actually wanted to become foster parents, but because of some run-ins with the law, the foster care system would not permit them to be foster parents. So that being said, that's something you have to think about. If you've had some criminal history, that either you or acquaintances of yours know about, then it may be really a problem to become a foster parent. After you get certified, then normally they will place foster kids in your house. I understand that the way it generally works is people have said, okay, we're certified, and no kids seem to ever get delivered by the stork or caseworker. And so they'll call the agency. Well, in our case, it was completely different. What we did is we decided, okay, we're kind of tired of having adults stay in our house, and so we decided we would become foster parents. So we started the process, and then we had someone who lived across the street, moved into a house there, and my wife got to talking with them one day, and they, I guess, let somebody stay there temporarily, somebody that they met, and that particular person said, hey, I've got this grandchild here, and I really don't, I want to be a grandmother. I don't want to be a mother, and I don't want to be a parent. Would you be willing to take him? And my wife said, well, yeah. And next thing you know, she had all of his stuff in our house within like 2 hours, and she was gone. Bad news was she was a state-appointed caretaker for that child. And so that was how we kind of got thrust into foster care. And what we did then is we went to our next training meeting, and we told the instructor, afterwards, and talked to her and said what happened. And she says, you got a problem there. She says, basically, you have an illegal child in the house. And then as it went on down the line with our certifier, she said, well, we can't certify you because you have an illegal child in the house. And so what they did is the agency became very creative, and what they did is they took this child into foster care the same day that they certified us. And that way he didn't have to be moved. And I remember when the investigator came out, her report said, we got a problem here because this child is bonded with his family, so we can't remove him. So it was great that they could work things out and make that all happen. And that was a good story, a good experience for us. Something that happens oftentimes in foster parenting is somebody gets hurt and you have an investigation. In our particular case, I remember a investigator came out to our house, and she made the comment that, wow, you sure have a small file for the number of foster kids you have had in your house. And we'd only had, I think, a total of four complaints of 4 investigations or accusations against us. One of them, which I think was probably the silliest, was a caseworker reported us because we had given our children and foster children a ride on our motorcycle. And this caseworker says, you can't do that. That's against the child services policy to be riding on a motorcycle because that's too dangerous. Well, our certifier was probably the sweetest person and probably one of the most reasonable persons we knew. And she said, well, I'll look into this. And she says, there is no such rule. So basically, that caseworker made that up because she thought it was too dangerous for the child. In our whole foster care experience, there were only, and I think I said this earlier, only 3 people that I thought were really good caseworkers or agency workers. The rest I thought were at best questionable. And the reason I say that is not because they're bad people. It's because they are inexperienced. Most of these caseworkers that we had were people who had never been married and never had kids of their own. And they all had degrees, and they had textbook theory of what parenting was like and what childhood, what it was like to be a child. and how discipline should be done and how discipline should not be done. So once again, all textbook theory. The caseworkers that I admired the most were the ones who actually had real life experiences with kids of their own. And so, you can't necessarily knock people for making bad decisions, especially when they're caseworkers. But in all reality, if that they will make false accusations against you, they will claim that a kid is out of control who really is just being a normal kid. Badger you, I suppose, even. We had one particular caseworker who came to pick up some kids and take them to a visit to their mother. And when she came back, she says, "I can't believe how bad that child was. It was poking holes in the upholstery in the car." And I said, well, what's so odd about that? Well, this caseworker thought that the child was completely emotionally disturbed and had some real big problems. Well, not really. That's a normal kid thing. Kids destroy and pick things apart all the time. That's what a kid does. So there was nothing wrong with the child, but this particular person never was married, never had any kids, foster kids or whatever. And so they oftentimes will jump to poor conclusions when they see behavior that they personally have never experienced. They only have textbook theory as to how children should be, how discipline should be done, etc. We had another incident where we were investigated for, and the agency decided that we needed some extra training, otherwise they were going to remove all the foster kids from our house. And so we had to go through this how not to use any physical punishment training for, I think it was 2 months. And this special counselor came out and gave us all this literature and talked to the kids individually and to us as a group, and went through all this stuff, and then all these tools and ways that you can circumvent doing physical punishment. And let me just digress here for a second. I am the opinion that physical punishment is a good thing. I think all children need to be spanked, and those who don't spank, that's too bad. If it was possible, I would sign my name to allow my kids to be spanked at school. I think spanking should be in school. So I don't think people should be beat up. I don't think they should be punched or bludgeoned to death or hit with a bat or anything like that, but they certainly should be spanked, and parents should have the right to spank them. In any case, so I think this incident was where my wife or I can't remember who it was, had swatted someone on the rear end or slapped their face when they did something, and so we got reported for that, and so we had to do this training about how no physical contact, and here's all the things you can do, and this person who came out, I think as of late has been offended because here she was, supposedly professional, thought that she had changed us to her way of thinking or the agency's way of thinking, and in all reality, all she did was teach us how to submit to the agency's rules. So remember that if you become a foster parent, you don't necessarily have to change your way of thinking per se, but you're going to have to submit to the way that the agency thinks. So if an agency says you can't spank your kids and you can't spank your foster kids, well, you got to work with them or stop being a foster parent, and that's just the way it is. And sometimes even later, those kind of things can come back to bite you. We moved to another state, and we had another incident, and this was after we were done foster parenting. We had already adopted our kids and left, and moved out and went somewhere else, and then someone made a report that we were spanking our kids. Yeah, well, we have that right to do that. So We had an investigator came out to our house and says, well, you can't be doing that and you can't be using a belt. Well, when I was raised, you could use a belt, you could use a spoon. I've had a race car track on my rear end, whatever. And to me, very effective. I think it disciplined me and made me a halfway decent person. So, once again, I am a firm supporter of spanking kids, and I think a belt's okay if you're not, you're not spanking them or hitting them on the back and stomach and face and all that kind of stuff. That's not okay, or kicking them. But yeah, give them a paddling. That's okay. In any case, this caseworker came out and says, well, you can't be doing that, and you can only use your bare hand here, otherwise everything else is abuse. Fine, whatever. So they did their investigation. I don't know what happened. In any case, nothing happened to us. And then she said in our conversation, "Oh, you've been foster parents? Well, would you like to be foster parents in this state?" And I said, "No, we're done, and we're retired from that. We're not willing to do that." The truth of the matter is, there was no way on earth that I was willing to suck up to a state agency again. I just didn't have the patience. My wife didn't have the patience to deal with caseworkers and the state. And so, remember, it's a challenge. It is a challenge to work with a state rules and state's rules on what you can and can't do. So, just remember that if you're going into that. And then you won't be so upset when something happens. We've all heard of stories like where foster parents will put a lock on the refrigerator because they're eating me out of house and home. Well, you know what? Kids eat. And if they start eating a whole lot, well, you know what? Kids do that. Especially when they get into their teenage years, they eat. Now, we did have a kid in our house once who we did respite care for. And the only thing we didn't like about that and the food was, my wife had got up for something and that kid was in the refrigerator eating all the ice cream and at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, how you handle that, use your own parenting judgment. It's a trial and error thing, as all parenting is. And that's once again why caseworkers who have never had kids don't get foster parents and they don't get kids. Because basically the only kids that they have experience with are problem ones, or ones that have come from problem homes. So basically they have a outside the window view of what or how a family should operate and how kids and parents react. And so, when you're the only experience you have is seeing a problem from the outside and then going in and trying to fix it, you're really crippled in your abilities to help either the parents or the kids to become better kids, better parents, better citizens, etc. As far as types of kids that you get, you may get anything from a parent who's been accused of spanking their child who gets removed from their home, to anywhere where someone's been sexually abused, someone whose parents have basically abandoned their kids for several days or weeks, or they're on drugs, and so they've been unable to take their kids or take care of their kids. Their diapers don't get changed, they don't get fed, they end up chewing on shoes because they don't have any food to eat. Some things are really despicable and terrible, but there are those situations, and I hate to say it, there's probably more than should be, where state agencies and caseworkers remove kids from homes who shouldn't be removed. And so once again, when people talk about that, people coming across the border and children being removed from families where they shouldn't be removed, well, state agencies are actually do a terrible job of removing kids who shouldn't be removed from their homes. So just know that happens. Another thing that's been kind of different in our house, when we did foster parenting, we've had at least one or more of the parents of almost all of our foster kids in our home on one or more occasions. We've done outings with them. And that's not a requirement that any agency has. And as a matter of fact, most foster parents take the attitude of, well, I'm a foster parent and I don't want to have to deal with their parents. That's not my job. Well, if you're in it for the money, I get it. That's your job. My wife and I's perception is, if this is really a home that has some problems and the parents are lacking some parenting skills, why should we just be a Band-Aid and take care of the kids and say, hey, parents, go figure out how to do it? We thought it was best to invite parents into our home and say, hey, or show them, hey, this is what we do. When we have this problem, this is how we handle it. Thing you have to remember is some of these homes where kids come from, the parents didn't have a very good upbringing themselves, and so they don't have those parenting skills or those coping skills or those problem-solving skills. And so our perception as foster parents was let's help them out. Let's be part of the solution to the community problem and problem families and problem children and problem parenting. Let's not just be a Band-Aid. So our home was different, and I don't know, but I dare to say that we were probably one of the few families that ever allowed families or parents of our foster kids into our home. One of them, we even loaned our car while she took her son on a trip to the zoo. And that's one of those things where you kind of have to feel it out and is that parent really trustworthy or not? And I wouldn't say that would be something you would do on a regular basis, but this particular experience, we gave her our car keys. She was licensed, and she took her kid to the zoo for the day. And it worked out. She came back. We actually went and visited her in her state, took a family vacation, spent some more time with her, and it was a good experience. Don't alienate the kids from their parents or say that their parents are bad people. And if you end up adopting them, in my opinion, don't cut off that opportunity for them to have contact with their parents. It's okay for them to love their parents, even though their parents may be unable to take care of them. And remember, you're just part of their upbringing. They have their other biological parents that they probably deeply love, and don't take that away from them. And it may be when they grow up, maybe you adopt them, or maybe when they grow up, they say, you know what, thanks for all your help. Now I want to go spend the rest of my life with my parents. Upsetting, depressing, maybe. But once again, you're there to help them to become individuals and help them to make good choices, be a good example for them, just to give them a good moral foundation, not to change their likes and dislikes in people. Let them show them what you do, and then give them some boundaries. And when they're 18, they'll do what they do, and you just got to let that happen. Other experiences. We've had a child once who was drugged behind a vehicle that I was driving, and we had a investigation done on us for that particular experience, because the child's knees got skinned up and her feet got skinned up, and the mother had a visit, I think it was later that day or the next day or something, and wanted to know what happened to the child. And then she made a report to the agency that we were abusive and that this child got injured because we were careless, and so we should have taken her to the hospital or to the emergency room because we didn't know what kind of damage she had, and blah, blah, blah. And so I think my wife, probably my wife, so in that particular story, she did a pretty good sales job as to, well, this is what I did as soon as we discovered that the child was there. We assessed the injury, immediately took care of it in this way, bandages and whatever else, washed it off before the pain kicked in. And the agency basically said, well, okay, you did a good job, but in the future, take her to the emergency room just to protect yourself and the agency. Okay, well, that was a fair recommendation to give. But in the end, as foster parents, you're going to have to make some tough decisions on what to do with kids, especially when they have problems or do things that they shouldn't do. And I hate to say this, but the agency is not perfect. And we actually had a kid that we were a foster parent for, actually him and his half-brother, and they were not working out in our home. And the older brother had some big-time problems, so big that he was actually going to a school that was locked from the inside so nobody could escape. And the classroom consisted of 4 students and 3 adults. And he was 8 years old, a pretty big kid. And he and his brother are, I think, the only 2 that we ever asked to have removed from our home. And the reason we did was because too many kids were getting hurt. Sad thing is I believe this kid, and I hate to say this, and I would testify to it in court if I had to, but I believe that he is going to be a big problem for society, and because the state removed him from his mother 4 times and put him into foster care 4 times. And what do you create there? You create someone who doesn't know how to love, someone who doesn't know how to receive love, someone who loses all their feelings, and I forget what that's called, sociopath. So he is a state child services agency created sociopath. And I wish that we could have helped there, but by the time he got to our house, the damage has been done. 8 years old. Never had a time to bond because he'd kept been moving by the agency. And I know someday we're going to see in the news where he's killed 1 or more people. And it's sad to say, but there's an example where the agency screwed that kid. And that happens. The way that we ended up not doing foster care anymore was kind of a sad experience. We had some kids. We had adopted most of our kids at this point in time, and we had this 2 kids in our home, and something had happened, and my wife had some sort of discipline, which was the kids had to go for a while or get up and get moving because they had got up and didn't do their chores or whatever it was. She says, "Okay, let's go. We're going for a walk." Nope, can't grab a coat, can't grab your shoes or wherever we're going. So she took them for a walk down the street. And some of them were barefooted and or in pajamas or whatever. And if you've ever been a parent, what kid has never walked outside barefooted or gone for long walks barefooted or walked outside and gone to play in their pajamas, whatever? So we all know that is nothing uncommon. Okay. Now, perhaps a bad choice on a parent to take them out like that. But in any case, wasn't really any big deal. It wasn't life-threatening or anything like that. So it turns out someone saw those kids with my wife out there, and they called the police and said that was a terrible thing, that someone was being abusive to their kids. And so the agency came out to assess the situation and says, well, since a child stepped on something and cut their foot, that was child abuse, and so we're going to remove these 2 kids from your home. The one kid, he was a teenager, and actually I think it was doing a pretty good job of bonding, and maybe a small error and lack of judgment, but really was it? Kids cut their feet when they're barefooted outside, and apparently the agency thought that was an abusive situation. They removed the kids, and then they did their investigation, blah blah blah, and then one of the caseworkers says, "Well, we have to do it. Doesn't really matter if my hands are tied. We got to take him out." So fine, they took him out, and then we had the certifier who called our house the next couple, maybe in a week or 2 weeks, and says, "Well, you ready for some more foster kids?" And I told her, I says, "Are you kidding? Since you removed those last kids for a reason that we thought was unjustified, we're done. We're not doing any more foster care." And that was the end of the phone call. The agency, that they're not really interested, I don't think, all the time in working through problems, small parental errors which are non-life threatening. They're really good at pointing the finger and said, you did a bad thing, so these kids are out of here. And their excuses, these kids have experienced so much abuse that if one little thing, if they get a hangnail and you yank that hangnail off their finger, well, you've caused pain in their life that they don't deserve. And so, I think they just go a little bit far and to the extreme when it comes to people parenting. And part of why that happens is, once again, most of the caseworkers there have no experience in parenting. They don't know what it's like to spank someone. They don't know what it's like to go through the process of showing them love afterwards or anything like that. So that's kind of my take on what it's like to be a foster parent. And I'll try to come up with some of these other topics as we go on through these particular videos. And if you want to do foster parenting, good luck. Enjoy it. Have fun. There are sometimes perks that you get with foster parenting, like in some states that they give you a free annual pass to all state parks where you can stay there for free. As long as you have foster care or you've adopted kids. I know of a state that actually all kids that were a foster care or that you adopted, they get to go to state colleges for free. So there are some financial perks, but that shouldn't be the reason why you do foster parenting, even though that is some people's motivation. And once again, like I said in the beginning, someone getting paid to be a foster parent and show at least a little financial love towards somebody, maybe more love than they were getting in the home that they were in. So not all homes are the best, and some are great. And I hope that you're one of those great foster parents and someone who can tolerate and stomach the agency and the caseworkers that you have to work with, especially the bad ones, because they are there like they are in every agency, whether it's the police department, foster care, caseworkers, whatever. There's problem people in all of those professions. So you just have to learn to work with them. And if you can learn to work with them, you'll become a great foster parent. And that's my take on why to become a foster parent. Thank you.